My name is Nora, and I have been married for 6 years. My husband, Sam, is a wonderful man, kind, reliable, and always ready to help. To those around us, we have the perfect marriage, shared dinners with friends, weekend trips to visit our parents, and traditional birthday and anniversary celebrations. Of course, we had our arguments, but they never escalated into anything serious. Most of our acquaintances called us the ideal couple. I met Sam in college. He was studying finance and had big ambitions. I, on the other hand, was passionate about interior design and dreamed of owning my own studio. Back then, we spent hours talking about our future, a spacious house with an open creative space, 2 or 3 children, and a Labrador running around the yard chasing them. The first years of our marriage truly felt like a fairy tale. We supported each other wholeheartedly. When Sam started his career in a financial firm, I helped him prepare for interviews and find advanced training courses. In return, he paid for my extra design courses and never doubted my talent. Over time, Sam became more and more absorbed in his work. I, too, started taking on more projects, at first collaborating with colleagues, then gradually receiving small orders from acquaintances. We took pride in our professional growth, but our evening conversations became increasingly formal. "How was your day?" "Fine. A bit tired." "Me too." "All right, I'm going to shower, then bed." We used to talk about our dreams, but now we mostly discussed weekly plans or things we needed to buy for the house. It felt like we were living in parallel realities that occasionally intersected. And although we had no major conflicts, I could feel the spark between us fading. Friends, family, and even colleagues saw no issues. We didn't fight. We had no financial troubles, and we weren't hiding anything from each other. Everyone around us still believed we were as deeply in love as we were in our college days. But I could feel that our love had turned into a comfortable routine. Sam probably sensed it too, but he made no effort to change it. Perhaps we both believed that as long as there was no crisis, everything was fine. I used to reminisce about the past with a sense of nostalgia, but at the same time, I convinced myself that this cooling off in marriage was normal. However, everything changed when I met Travis, a younger colleague in our department. Travis was new at the company where I worked as an interior designer. Part of my job was to mentor interns and junior specialists, introducing them to our projects and internal processes. He was 24, 5 years younger than me, and stood out with his outgoing personality and lighthearted sense of humor. During our first work meeting, I noticed the way he looked at me, with curiosity, something I hadn't seen from Sam in a long time. He wasn't shy about complimenting my ideas, praising my presentation. One evening, when we stayed late at work to finish some blueprints, Travis said, "Nora, you have an amazing creative vision. And I haven't met many people who are so passionate about their craft." I laughed, thanking him, but I felt a warm wave of satisfaction. Sam never spoke to me so openly about my work. He might say, "Oh, nice," but he never truly encouraged or appreciated me. When Travis started asking personal questions like, "How long have you been working here?" or "Tell me more about your design style," I realized that I didn't mind sharing. He genuinely seemed interested and fascinated by my ideas. Over time, our office conversations became longer and more engaging. We talked not only about work projects, but also about movies, music, and weekend plans. Travis often joked about our age difference. "You're more experienced, that's true. But don't say you're old. You're not even 30 yet, right?" His keen interest in my preferences was hard to ignore. Sometimes, I found myself replying to his messages even when they weren't urgent. One evening, he texted, "There's a nice cafe where it's great to work on blueprints. Want to work together if you're not home yet?" What a strange feeling. Sam hadn't invited me anywhere without an occasion in a long time, yet here was a younger colleague taking the initiative. Of course, I understood that this could be the beginning of a dangerous path. When Travis first suggested grabbing coffee after work, my heart skipped a beat. I was married, but I justified it to myself. It's just a work-related friendship, nothing more. But deep down, I enjoyed it. I felt interesting again, youthful, desired. It only took one more step for the interaction to turn into outright flirting. During this period, Sam hardly paid attention to me. In the evenings, when I came home, he was usually checking emails, sitting at his computer, preparing reports, or getting ready for business meetings. I wanted to tell him about my day, but he would usually respond briefly. Just give me 10 more minutes. 10 minutes would turn into an hour, and I'd go to bed feeling slightly disappointed. This stark contrast to Travis, who always asked, "How are you?" and actually listened, made me start comparing them, even in the smallest details. And that only deepened my dissatisfaction with my marriage. For a few weeks, my meetings with Travis remained strictly work-related, at least on the surface. We still discussed projects, blueprints, and design plans. But there was always an invisible spark in the air, making every phrase feel layered with an unspoken meaning. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't help but sink into the feeling. One evening, just as I was getting ready to head home, Travis texted, "I just came up with a few fresh ideas for our client. Want to meet somewhere in the city and go over them over a cup of coffee?" I hesitated. Sam was waiting for me at home, though his waiting had become more passive lately, but curiosity and the desire to escape the routine won over. We met at a cozy cafe. We discussed our business ideas for about 15 minutes, and the rest of the time, we talked about movies, weekend plans, and childhood dreams. Travis had a way of looking straight into my eyes, as if trying to read my hidden thoughts. I caught myself smiling at his jokes, genuinely enjoying the attention that was growing increasingly personal. "You're so inspiring, Nora. No wonder you became a designer," he said with admiration. I hadn't heard such words from Sam in a long time. Maybe he thought I was talented, but he never expressed it so emotionally. That night, lying in bed next to Sam, I couldn't sleep. His steady breathing annoyed me. He slept peacefully while I was caught in a whirlwind of new emotions. I kept turning from side to side, replaying Travis's smile, his voice, and how our knees had accidentally brushed under the cafe table. Such a tiny moment, yet it felt incredibly intimate. In the morning, I received a message from Travis. "Last night was great. Thank you. Hope we continue our conversation soon," smiley face. I felt a pleasant tightness in my chest, the same spark I had been craving. But I was a married woman, so why did I want to reply so badly? On Monday, Travis and I ended up alone in the office after hours. There was still a lot of work left, so he suggested ordering food and setting up in the conference room. We joked and said, "Just a few more touches, and the project is done." We tested a couple of color combinations in the blueprints, listened to music. Then suddenly, I felt his hand on mine. At first, it was just a light touch. I didn't pull away. On the contrary, I looked at him and saw the silent question in his eyes. "Can I go further?" "Nora, I don't want to do anything that would make you uncomfortable," he said quietly. I silently lowered my head, signaling that I wasn't against it. His lips gently brushed mine. It was an exploratory kiss, soft and hesitant. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear my own pulse in my ears. We sat frozen for a few seconds, as if suspended in time. Then, an uncontrollable wave of passion swept over me, and I kissed him back. This wasn't innocent curiosity anymore. It was a true release of long-suppressed desire. When the kiss ended, a wave of guilt crashed over me. I imagined Sam's face, unaware of what had just happened, and the wedding ring still on my finger. But at the same time, deep inside, I felt a joyful relief. I was a woman again, desired and admired. Trying to suppress the echoes of doubt, I told Travis, "Maybe we should stop before this goes too far." He gave me a sad smile. Going too far, is that really such a bad thing? I didn't know how to answer. This brief moment had made one thing clear. I could no longer deceive myself. Our connection was no longer just friendship or just work. I had crossed a line I both feared and longed to cross. After that evening in the office and the first kiss with Travis, my life became a dangerous game. I felt pressure from both sides. On one, guilt and fear of Sam. On the other, the passionate desire to continue these secret meetings with my younger colleague. Travis and I started finding small gaps in our work schedules to be alone together. At first, it was coffee breaks that stretched into half-hour sessions at a nearby cafe where we quietly sat at the same table, holding hands under it. Then evening project work sessions where we pretended to be diligently working but were actually talking about everything that connected us. I began to look forward to his messages with a special thrill.
How are you?
Thinking about our evening yesterday, smiley face. I would read them and smile, even when Sam was sitting right next to me, too busy with his laptop to notice how often I was on my phone. But it hurt to realize how easily I was lying to my husband, the man I used to share everything with. Meanwhile, Sam noticed that I was coming home later, isolating myself more often with my phone or a laptop. He started trying to get my attention. "Let's go somewhere for the weekend?" But I kept making excuses. "I have a project deadline. I don't have time." One evening, he confronted me directly. "Nora, you seem distant. Am I doing something wrong, or do you need some things?" I lowered my gaze. "I'm sorry. Work is just taking up a lot of my energy." There was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but he didn't press further. I sensed that he might already suspect something, or at the very least, feel that something had changed between us. Yet, instead of making an effort to reconnect, we both pretended that everything was fine. The hardest part was balancing two roles: mornings as a wife, quickly making breakfast before rushing to work, and evenings when I was often working late with a colleague who is now much more than just a friend. Coming home, I carried a strange mix of happiness and guilt. I started avoiding Sam's questions. "Aren't you hungry? How was your day?" Responding with brief, dismissive phrases. But with Travis, my answers were long and genuine. We talked about music, our happiest childhood memories, our hopes for the future. He showered me with sweet compliments, making me feel alive again, and I sensed our feelings growing deeper. One evening, while Sam was away on a business trip, Travis texted me, "I'm near your house. Want to have a glass of wine if you're home alone?" I hesitated at first. Letting him into my home would be a real betrayal, right in front of the bed I shared with Sam, in the space filled with his things. But my desire to be with Travis won out. When he stepped into the living room, my pulse quickened just from his presence. We talked in the dim light, sipping wine, and soon our conversation turned into lingering embraces, which quickly became something more. I knew this was the moment I would cross the final line. But I couldn't stop. My need to feel passion again was too strong, and Sam's absence only made it easier to give into temptation. When it was over, I lay next to Travis, staring at the ceiling. My body was still trembling from adrenaline, yet a wave of sadness washed over me. I had just completely betrayed my husband in our own home. But strangely, I didn't feel regret. Instead, I felt relief, as if I had been freed from the weight of loneliness I had carried for so long. After that night with Travis in my home, I knew I had completely crossed the line. During the day at work, I would glance at him, recalling every moment of our intimacy. It felt as though we now shared a secret, one that both thrilled and terrified me. I began to notice changes in my mood. At work, I was smiling, inspired, full of energy. But at home with Sam, I was distant, cold, as if I were living in two parallel worlds. The deeper I sank into my affair with Travis, the further I drifted from my husband. One evening, Sam came home and was surprisingly attentive. He asked about my day, suggested we cook dinner together. I could see it in his eyes. He was trying to restore the warmth in our relationship. But instead of feeling touched, I felt irritated. My thoughts were elsewhere, planning the next day with Travis. One evening, I worked late again, but in reality, I had gone to a restaurant with Travis. When I returned home, I found Sam sitting on the couch, his phone in hand. His voice was eerily calm. "Nora, have you checked the time?" "Sorry, I had a lot of work again." He looked at me, then lowered his gaze as if weighing his next words. "Are you sure it's just work?" My heart skipped a beat. He was beginning to suspect something. But I quickly recovered and launched into an elaborate explanation about my overwhelming workload, the pressure of deadlines, and how much my colleagues relied on me. He didn't argue, but I could see in his eyes he didn't believe me. Not entirely. At the same time, I found myself relying more and more on Travis. He adored me, checked in on me at all hours, sent thoughtful messages that made me feel wanted. He gave me small gifts, like a beautiful mug with the word "inspire" on it, saying, "You inspire me." Sometimes he would come to work early just to meet me at the entrance with coffee. If a few hours passed without a message from him, I would feel anxious, craving his attention. I realized I was developing an emotional dependency. His presence made me feel alive, but what would happen if it all suddenly ended? Along with the excitement, anxiety began to creep in. What if Sam found out? How could I explain why I had betrayed our marriage? And what did I really feel for Travis? Was this just passion or something deeper? He was younger than me, our life experiences were different, and I had no idea how serious this really was. I tried not to think about it, choosing instead to focus on the immediate joy of being with him. But deep down, I knew this couldn't last forever. One afternoon, Travis and I decided to have lunch at a small restaurant a bit further from our office. We were sitting at a cozy table, laughing, completely absorbed in each other. And then I saw him, Sam. He was walking down the street, just outside the window. My heart pounded. What if he saw us? I instinctively ducked lower in my seat, and Travis quickly looked down at his phone, pretending to be distracted. Sam walked past without looking in. But that fleeting moment filled me with dread. I realized how easily my double life could unravel. And I wasn't ready for the consequences. Time was passing, and my double life was becoming harder to manage. I could no longer lie to Sam with ease. He was asking direct questions more often, noticing inconsistencies in my stories, and picking up on my nervousness. At home, the atmosphere was tense, while with Travis, everything was too passionate, too unpredictable. I started feeling a growing sense of anxiety. Every time I came home late, I feared walking into the apartment only to find Sam waiting, his expression full of silent accusations. One evening, he confronted me with the contradictions in my perfect alibis. "You said you were in the office with a colleague, but your car was parked near the shopping center. Yesterday, you told me you had urgent work to finish, but your boss just called asking where you were because you weren't at your desk." I tried to come up with excuses. I grabbed something to eat at the mall, or he must have confused the timing, but I could see that Sam wasn't buying it. His patience was wearing thin. One evening, we had the worst fight in our marriage. Sam couldn't hold it in anymore. "Nora, I feel like you're lying to me. Just tell me the truth." I can't keep living in this constant atmosphere of deceit. I nervously dismissed his accusations, tried to act offended, told him he was just being jealous over my job. But deep down, I felt panic creeping in. He was getting dangerously close to uncovering the truth. Meanwhile, Travis was growing impatient. He no longer wanted to be just a series of stolen moments and late-night rendezvous. His messages took on a different tone. I want to spend more time with you, not just sneak around in the shadows. Aren't we a real couple? His insistence made me uneasy. On one hand, I feared losing the passion and attention he gave me. On the other hand, I knew that making our relationship public meant the end of my marriage. One day, he even hinted at planning a weekend getaway together, but I immediately declined. Too risky. He was visibly upset. It feels like you just don't want to change anything. You're comfortable having two men, your husband at home and your lover for emotions, aren't you? His words hit deep. Was I really keeping both Sam and Travis because it benefited me? And if so, was that fair to either of them? Right around this time, Nick, a longtime friend of both Sam and me, reached out. He had just gone through a divorce and asked if we could talk. He needed support, said he was feeling lost and alone. I agreed to meet him for coffee, not realizing that this friendly meeting would add yet another complication to my already tangled life. Nick had always been an interesting conversationalist. As we sat in the cafe, he spoke about the pain of his breakup. I genuinely felt for him and, in turn, opened up about the struggles in my own marriage. Somehow, the conversation turned personal, and then I caught his gaze on me. A look that said, "You're lonely, just like me, aren't you?" A strange feeling stirred inside me. Warmth, understanding. Was I actively seeking something new? Probably not. But when someone offers you the emotional connection you've been missing, it's hard not to be drawn in. At this point, my life had turned into complete chaos. Sam was on the verge of discovering my affair with Travis. Travis was no longer content with just being my secret escape. And Nick, who unexpectedly reappeared, was now stirring even more confusion in my heart with his quiet sadness and shared loneliness. I realized that continuing down this path meant triggering a domino effect, one that could destroy my marriage, my friendships, and my affair all at once. But stopping felt just as impossible. I had tasted emotional intensity, and now, every spark pulled me in even deeper. Time was passing, and I felt like my life was turning into a tangled web of relationships, a love triangle, or maybe even a square. Me, Sam, Travis, and now Nick. Although nothing officially romantic had happened with Nick, our friendship was growing increasingly intimate on an emotional level. More and more, I felt that Nick understood me in ways no one else did. And that was dangerous. Realizing that we were both going through a crisis, Nick and I began texting more often in the evenings. He talked about his struggles after the divorce, while I shared my problems with Sam and my confusion about Travis, without revealing the more scandalous details. One evening, after yet another fight with Sam, Nick invited me to just take a walk around the city and let off some steam. I agreed, thinking it was entirely harmless. After all, we were just friends, and he was a friend of the family. But as we walked, I felt familiar sparks between us, attention, meaningful glances, light touches. Under the glow of a street lamp, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You're incredible, Nora." "Why doesn't Sam see that?" he whispered. My heart clenched. I knew this was crossing the line of friendship, but at the same time, our shared loneliness consumed us both. I should have stopped it, but I didn't. As we returned to his car, I felt it was time to part ways. But then he grabbed my hand. "Wait, I don't want this evening to end yet." I froze as he gently pulled me into an embrace. It felt so natural, as if I had found a missing piece of myself, something I hadn't felt with Sam for a long time. And then, suddenly, his lips brushed against mine. I didn't pull away. Deep inside, I had been longing for emotional closeness, and Nick, somehow, was able to give it to me. It wasn't as passionate as it was with Travis. It was different, softer, more delicate. And yet, it was my second betrayal. I was married. I had a lover, Travis. And now, I had also allowed a family friend to touch me in a way that wasn't innocent. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead of feeling guilty for betraying one man, I had betrayed two. Why couldn't I just choose one person? Maybe because Travis gave me something wild, passionate, unpredictable. And Nick gave me comfort, warmth, and safety. At the same time, Sam had become more of a burden of obligations than a loving partner. But I still couldn't admit to myself that I desperately needed his support, too. Meanwhile, Travis started noticing that I was pulling away. He saw me ignoring his messages, making excuses about being busy. One day, he was waiting for me at the office when I returned from lunch, which was actually a meeting with Nick. "Where were you? Why didn't you answer?" he asked, his voice tinged with jealousy. I tried to laugh it off, but he could see right through me. "I get it. As soon as you get bored with me, you find someone else?" I swallowed hard, feeling like I was now being exposed on another front. Sam, too, was growing more suspicious. I noticed him checking my phone's search history. He started asking my colleagues what time I was leaving the office. He was on the verge of confronting me. I couldn't even imagine what would happen if he found out about not one, but two affairs. His reaction would be devastating. For the first time, I seriously considered telling the truth and ending this madness. But the fear of losing everything, Sam, the thrill I got from Travis, and the comfort I found in Nick, paralyzed me. Immaturity? Maybe. But I was too entangled in my own mess to make a decisive move. My days had become a chaotic cycle of meetings with Travis and emotional conversations, and sometimes kisses, with Nick. At the same time, Sam's suspicions grew stronger, and I was constantly expecting to be caught. My excuses, work, late nights, and business meetings felt like a desperate game I was failing at, even deceiving myself in the process. One evening, I came home around 11 p.m. to find Sam standing by the window, as if he had been waiting for me. The moment I walked in, his voice carried a mix of despair and anger. "Where were you? And don't tell me at work. I called your office at 9. There was no one there." I fumbled with an explanation, muttering something about a meeting in another place we had to drive out of town for. But my words sounded weak, pathetic even. Sam cut me off sharply. "Stop lying, Nora. I can see you're hiding things. You come home late, you avoid me, and you guard your phone like it's a state secret. Just tell me the truth for once." His eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with betrayal and rage. I stood frozen, unable to confess. It would hurt him too much, and it would be too shameful for me. The next day, I met with Travis in our usual secret cafe. He was clearly frustrated, though trying to keep his emotions in check. "I can feel that you're slipping away. When you don't answer my messages, I start thinking you're with someone else. Maybe even your husband." His jealousy startled me. He knew I was married, yet he expected my full devotion. I tried to reason with him. "Sam, he's getting suspicious. I can't be open about us. Don't you understand?" But as I said it, the words felt hollow. "He's suspicious" should have only applied to my affair with Travis, but I knew deep down I was hiding Nick as well. Nick had also been texting me more often, saying he felt lonely after his divorce and that I was the only person who truly understood him. He invited me for a late dinner, Just the two of us, so we can talk in peace. I agreed, diving deeper into my web of lies. I'll just tell Sam it's a business meeting with clients, I thought. That night, Nick and I talked for hours. He seemed even more vulnerable than before. I tried to comfort him, and at some point, our conversation melted into gentle touches, kisses. Inside, I was screaming at myself. This was the second man I was betraying Sam with. But instead of guilt, I felt numb. Apathy toward my own morality consumed me. And that night, the night I feared most, it happened. Sam had decided to follow me. Perhaps he had gathered enough evidence and wanted to confirm his worst suspicions. I didn't realize it until Nick and I were leaving the restaurant, and I saw a silhouette in the shadows across the street. I recognized him immediately. Sam stood there, partially hidden, but his eyes were fixed on us. He had seen everything, the kisses, the closeness. My heart dropped. What have I done? I screamed internally. Then, suddenly, Sam stepped forward. I knew something terrible was about to happen. Nick sensed the tension and took a cautious step back. Sam approached, his face twisted in fury and pain, his fists clenched. Nora. I see you're at work again, he spat, his voice dripping with sarcasm and heartbreak. I stood frozen. No words could fix this. Nick tried to step in. Sam, it's not what you think. You, my friend. Or, were you my friend? And this is what you do. For a second, I thought Sam was going to punch Nick. His muscles tensed, his jaw tightened. But somehow, he restrained himself. Nick backed away, realizing this could turn into a full-blown fight. Sam turned back to me, his eyes burning with disbelief and devastation. I can't believe it. You with him? What the hell happened to you, Nora? I couldn't say anything. My mind flashed through every moment. My affair with Travis, now with Nick. It was all crashing down. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to find an excuse, but Sam just shook his head. I don't want to hear anything from you right now. Just go. I can't even look at you. Panicking, I ran. I left Sam and Nick behind, drowning in their shock and anger. Tears blurred my vision as I got into a cab, and only then did I realize I had no idea where to go. Back to our home, where only more pain awaited me. Or somewhere else. Anywhere else, just to escape from the reality I had created. I left the scene of the confrontation in a state of shock and panic. Faces of Sam, Nick, and Travis flashed in my mind. All the men I loved in my own way, yet betrayed at the same time. My world had turned upside down in a single moment. Where should I go? How could I explain myself? I was on the verge of hysteria when the taxi stopped in front of our, now, I wasn't sure if it was still our, house. I walked inside and felt an eerie emptiness. Sam hadn't come home yet. He had probably stayed behind with Nick, trying to make sense of what had happened, or was wandering the city, attempting to process the betrayal of two people he had trusted. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my head in my hands, feeling too exhausted to justify myself or resist the consequences. A whirlwind of emotions tore through me: shame, regret, fear. I called Travis, but he didn't answer. Maybe he had already heard about what happened with Nick, or maybe he was avoiding me now. My mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. That's it. I've lost my husband, my friend, and my lover in one night. The next day at the office, Travis met me with a gaze full of anger and disappointment. Nora, I heard what happened last night. You were with Nick. You, who told you? I stammered. I'm not stupid. Sam talked to your boss, and now the whole office is whispering about it. People are saying you with your husband's friend? And also, I don't even want to think about it. I felt a crushing wave of shame. Apparently, in his devastation, Sam had spoken to someone. maybe called people in the heat of the moment, and now rumors were spreading like wildfire. Travis looked humiliated, furious. I thought I was the one giving you what you weren't getting from Sam. And now I find out there was someone else too? I had no answer. Maybe I should have admitted that I myself didn't know how things had gotten so out of control. In the end, all I could say was, I was confused, Travis. I was missing something. I wasn't looking for another lover. It just happened. He cut me off sharply. You lied to me, Nora. I won't be the third or fifth link in your cycle of betrayal. Brushing past me, he stormed out of the conference room. That was it. I had lost Travis too. Soon after, Nick called. His voice was filled with guilt. Sam almost beat me up. I don't know how to live with this. I'm sorry. Maybe we shouldn't have let things go this far. This was a mistake. He called it a mistake, but I knew deep down that I had wanted it too. Now it was over, and he was withdrawing from it all. He sounded tormented, sighing heavily. I never wanted to destroy your marriage. Sam was my friend. God, I feel like a piece of shit. I couldn't comfort him. I felt just as terrible. And just like that, I had lost Nick too. When I came home that evening, I found Sam packing his bags. His eyes were red. He hadn't slept. On the table, I saw papers. I recognized them immediately. Divorce papers. Nora, I don't want to hear any explanations. You didn't just betray me with one person, but two people I considered close. I can't forgive this. His voice was hollow. Sam, I really didn't know how else to. But any words felt pathetic. He wasn't shouting. He was just looking at me with exhaustion and a shattered heart. I'm going to stay with my mother for now. You can stay here until we sort out the formalities. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I felt my world collapse for the final time. No screaming, no anger, just the cold decision to leave my life forever. Left alone in our empty apartment, I realized I had lost everything. The office was already buzzing with rumors about my affairs, and I heard whispers that I might be fired soon. Apparently, my workplace romance scandal had harmed the company's reputation. Travis had completely distanced himself, avoiding me entirely. Nick no longer wanted any contact, consumed by guilt over his betrayal of Sam. And Sam, he was gone. I sat on the couch, unable to stop the tears. Was this because I had craved passion? Or because I had been too cowardly to face my problems with Sam honestly? Maybe both. Now, I had no husband, no lovers, no friends. Only the realization that in my desperate search for love, I had destroyed everything. After Sam left for his mother's and both Travis and Nick distanced themselves, I found myself alone in the empty apartment that had once been our cozy family home. Now, it felt like a cold, lifeless space, filled only with reminders of my mistakes. For the first few days, I barely got out of bed, drowning in despair. My job was also on the brink of collapse. Management had initiated an internal review due to my violation of corporate ethics, a workplace affair, and I had no energy left to defend myself. I had lost 2 lovers, my husband, the respect of my friends, and my professional reputation. But amidst the grief, I felt an odd sense of relief. My lies had been exposed, and now I no longer had to maintain this false reality. Sitting alone in the empty apartment, I realized I had been left with no one but myself. All my excuses and desires had been directed outward. I had tried to fill the void inside me with other people. And now, I had to admit that before I could be happy in any relationship, I needed to figure out who I was. The divorce was finalized much faster than I had expected. Sam and I barely spoke. He avoided long conversations and only focused on settling financial matters and dividing our assets. I insisted on staying in the apartment temporarily until I could afford to move out. During our final meeting to sign the paperwork, Sam seemed calm, but completely detached. Maybe I'm partly to blame for not paying enough attention to our problems. But 2 betrayals, Nora? I can't forgive that. There was a trace of the love we once shared in his eyes, now replaced by bitterness. I silently nodded, knowing there were no excuses left. We simply parted ways, no screaming, no dramatic breakdowns. Perhaps we had already said everything that needed to be said. A few weeks later, I gathered the courage to message Travis. I wanted to apologize for deceiving him and to check how he was doing. He replied curtly, saying he wasn't holding a grudge but didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I cried reading his message, realizing just how terrible the situation must have looked from his perspective. Nick also responded briefly. He thanked me for being there during his tough times, but admitted that our closeness had been a mistake that hurt Sam and damaged his reputation among friends. He didn't want to revisit the topic. Ultimately, I left my job by mutual agreement. My relationships with colleagues were ruined, and my reputation made it impossible to continue working there. I decided to move to another city and start over. At first, it was unbearably difficult. Loneliness and shame followed me like shadows. But at the same time, I felt an odd sense of freedom. I was no longer lying to anyone. I started seeing a therapist to understand why I had so easily crossed the line and allowed myself to spiral so far out of control. Will I ever find love again? Will I be able to forgive myself and build a mature, honest relationship? Only time will tell. But now I know one thing. Real happiness can't be found through betrayal, because in the end, you lose everything, those you love and your own self-respect. My story of a double and ultimately, even a triple, life ended in destruction for everyone involved. I lost my husband, my lovers, and my friends. But maybe in this loss lies an opportunity, a chance to start anew, to learn from my mistakes, and to finally be honest about what I want. The end.
Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.